rest of the house is still asleep, so I thought I'd get a few minutes to talk to you about one of my favorite subjects, which is the lore of the 41st Millennium. Today I'm going to give you a quick overview of exactly that, the 41st Millennium. Yeah, and I'm going to be drinking some coffee. Now, if you've ever picked up a 40k book, they will say, in the grim darkness of the 41st Millennium, there is only war. Now, this is of course not true in the literal sense. There is not only war on every planet at all times. However, it is true that war is very close to the forefront of the mind of every being in the 41st Millennium. And that is very important to keep that centered when you think about the 41st Millennium. War and conflict is the central premise. That's what every race and every faction centers around. Now first I'm going to be talking about the Imperium of Man and chaos. This is the biggest conflict there is. Every other faction gets involved in some way at some point. And the very fate of the galaxy hangs in the balance of this conflict. That is the quick overview of that. Now I'll talk to you a bit about what is the Imperium of Man. Well, it's first off, it's incredibly huge. There are like millions of planets in the Imperium of Man. Just let that sink in. Millions of planets. That's a lot of planets with a lot of people on them. It is ruled over by the Emperor. He's called the God Emperor of Mankind, and he sits on what is called the Golden Throne, which is a life support system. The thing is, he was wounded by one of his chaos-worshipping sons, not literal sons, but made from his gene stock. This was in an event called the Horus Heresy, and the one who wounded him was indeed Horus. I'm not going to go into that very much, but the point is, not right now anyways, but the point is, he was wounded, he sits on a life support system. He doesn't act, he doesn't give orders, he doesn't tell people what to do, but he is worshipped as a god by the untold billions of the Imperium of Man. Very much so. Now, it is not without point that he sits there. It's not that he might as well be dead, because there is something called the Astronomicon, which guides ships through the warp. It is what allows us to travel faster than light. Yeah. Now I'm going to go into what the armed forces of the Imperium. Primarily I'll talk a bit about the Space Marines. They are very much at the forefront of the law and a lot of conflicts. Not every conflict necessarily, but a lot of conflicts there at the forefront. They are gene-modified super soldiers with incredible gear. The best that humanity has and has had for the last 10 millennia. In essence, they are made from the genes of the Primarchs, who in turn are made from the genes of the Emperor. The Emperor was no normal man when he walked. He was very much a superhuman, bordering on godlike powers. And they are worshipped in some ways as angels. They are very superhuman. The rest of the Imperial forces are, well, there are normal humans, which comprise the Astra Militarum, or the Imperial Guard, whatever you like to call it, actually, and a lot of other factions. They're too numerous to mention here, all of them, but I will go into greater detail about that in another episode, or another video. Now, what is the goal, the purpose of the Imperium of Man? That is, what do they want to achieve? First off, they want to achieve survival for the human race. That is the most important thing on everyone's mind. The galaxy is out, the mindset of the Imperium is that the galaxy is out to get them, human race, and we need to fight back. Yeah. And because we have this very xenophobic view, it's also very true that the next point of order on the agenda of the human race is to become the only sentient race in the galaxy, because if every other race is an enemy, we need to eradicate our enemies. That is the worldview of the Imperium. And of course, this is not, this comes tied to number 2, eradicate all traces of chaos in the material plane. Chaos is the arch enemy of man, in some ways. At least in the worldview of a lot of the Imperium. Which brings us neatly on to, what is chaos? Chaos is... It's hard to define easily, but and there will be omissions in what I'm going to say, and I'll follow up on that in other videos. But basically it is the followers and creations of 4 godlike entities that reside in the warp. Now, what is the warp? The warp is another dimension, another plane of existence. It has no laws of physics. Instead, it is ruled completely, at least semi-completely, by the 4 gods of chaos, who in turn are representations of human emotions. Now, they were born and achieved sentience during times that particularly represented that aspect, those feelings that they represent. And they grow stronger whenever those emotions grow stronger, are in ascendance in the material plane. I'm going to list them for you. Now, first is Khorne. Khorne represents war, slaughter, bloodshed. As such, he is often the strongest of the 4 Chaos Gods, because there is a lot of war in the 41st Millennia, and has been for a long time. Yeah. His followers revolve a lot around bloodshed, war, killing, all that stuff. And so do his creations, which are called demons. Next is Tzeentch. Tzeentch is change, ambition, cunning, those sort of things. He very much represents the... Well, his followers are the ones who want to get higher up in the hierarchy. They are the ones who believe that they themselves should have more power, especially politically. They are the seekers of forbidden knowledge. They are the ones who are mutated because of the power of the warp, that sort of stuff. And yeah, he has very convoluted plans as well. Thirdly, Nurgle. Nurgle is pestilence, decay, entropy. He is... he very much embodies disease. Disease is his strongest aspect in many ways. At least as it takes view in the 41st Millennia, and how people view him. His are the worlds where plagues riddle everyone. His are that sort of stuff. Yeah. He's a jolly fellow, though. He's not where the others see them, maybe even view themselves as malicious. Khorne is very angry. Tzeentch always wants to be on top. Nurgle is very much a jolly fella who just wants everyone to get along and take it easy and be sick. Yeah. And fourthly, and lastly, we have Slaanesh. Slaanesh is pleasure, passion, and decadence. His are the cults, the followers who indulge themselves in whatever passion or decadence they can find, often found amongst the nobility of the Imperium. They they do whatever they please, and they get more and more decadent, more and more weird in their whatever they're doing. They follow their passions to the extreme. Yeah. Now, they are on one side and the Imperium is on the other side, but that does not mean that what they want is the same thing all the time. The four gods are very much in competition. They don't like each other, and most of the time they're fighting each other as well. But they do have a common goal, which is to bring the Immaterium, or the warp, which is the Immaterium is another name for the warp, and the material plane closer together, perhaps so that the warp can swallow our plane of existence completely. That is their common goal, and sometimes it leads at least some of them, and sometimes all of them, to work together. I will say that there is a caveat to this. They are gods. They are meant to be incomprehensible in some ways as well. We might not know exactly what they want. Perhaps what they want is this internal conflict to go on, actually, or stuff like that. And they are affected by human emotions, so maybe sometimes some of them will want to lose. It's complicated, but I'll get into that another time. Now I'm going to go into what the other factions are, the other races, actually, the non-human races, who are called Xenas by the Imperium and by Games Workshop as well. First, I'm going to talk about Eldar. The Eldars are a dwindling, dying race. At some point, they used to rule most of the galaxy. They had a galactic empire, but they grew decadent and hedonistic and world-weary and didn't care much about anything except their own pleasures. And actually, they grew so decadent that they, by accident, or at least not by design, by them, created the fourth Chaos God, Slaanesh. And in his birthing rage, he destroyed most of them, and certainly the Galactic Empire. Now, the Eldars look like humanoids. They're very elf-like. Think space elves, basically. They very much view humans as the backwards, and they look down upon them. They think they're ignorant and naive and dangerous in most cases. They don't trust us, most certainly, and the feeling is mutual. Now, they're also a fractured culture. There are at least 4 different kinds of Eldar that I'm going to go into. First and most common is the craft world Eldars. They travel around in craft worlds, which are a mix between almost a small planetoid and a spaceship that travels, that moves around in space. Now, the craft world Eldars are highly advanced, though they do not advance their technology any further. They have their technology, which is highly advanced, but they don't advance it. They just have it. They have a very strict cultural hierarchy. You move through different phases in your life and stuff like that, and they are obsessed with trying to defeat chaos and keep themselves alive, keep their culture alive. That is their goal. Yeah. Secondly, we have the Drukhari, or Dark Eldar. Now, these are mean. They hunt people for sport. They're devious. They're cunning. They feed off others' pains. They're nasty. They're the nasty elves. They are basically the descendants of those who, how can I put this? They are the descendants of those who created Slaanesh, mostly. And they're not followers of Slaanesh in most cases, but at least in most cases, but they have a hunger for pain. They are infected in some way by Slaanesh and that stuff, but they don't follow him as such. Yeah. Then we have the most enigmatic of the bunch, the Harlequins. They are the third faction. Faction is perhaps a wrong word. They're actually not a part of a faction. They're these enigmatic elite warriors who fight chaos. They follow the Laughing God and travel through the webway, which is another way of travel. It's a basically teleport network that the Eldar have that allows them to bypass the warp for fast travel, and they live there. They live outside basically any plane or in a pocket dimension in there. Their goals are always enigmatic. You never quite know what they're doing in most cases and stuff like that. And they play games, mind games. Finally, we have Exodites. Exodites are descendants of Eldars who, when the Eldar race became decadent and pleasure-driven, they simply left for terraformed what they call maiden worlds, where they would live a simpler life, and that's what they're still doing. They're kind of uncivilized. Rustic would be a name. They're not that featured in many things, but they're worth mentioning. They're like in many ways they might be the most pure Eldar out there, but also the least powerful in some ways, because they don't use technology a lot. Instead, they rely on bonding with what is basically dinosaurs and stuff like that. Next, those were the Eldar. Next, we're going to go over Orcs. Now, Orcs are basically a fungoid race. They are mushrooms. They grow through spores, and you can never quite get rid of an infestation out of it. And I do say infestation because they are a menace. They like fighting. That is what they do. It's not all they do, but it's mostly what they do. And they'll fight each other if there's no one else around to fight. They follow the gods of Gork and Mork, which represent brutality and cunning. Most orcs, at least the leaders, have a focus on the brutality, but also some cunning. But some we're more on the side of cunning, and then some brutal. Those are the two aspects that they worship. They thrive on war. They really do, and they have the physical power comparable to a space marine, an Adeptus Astartes as they're called. With individuals like war bosses and their generals like reaching even greater strength, like really massive strength. Now they're a weird race, so bear with me here. They all have a low-level psychic emission or psychic power, like they are in touch with. We think the theory is at least that it's the warp in some way, and this is what allows their technology to work, because their technology should not work. It's ham-fisted. It should break down all the time and stuff, but it doesn't. At least not while in the hands of orcs, because their beliefs have power because of their low-level psychic. This also gives them a communal feeling of aggression. They get more and more aggressive the more of them that get together, and they reproduce rapidly. And when they rise in numbers, that aggression rises. When it reaches critical mass, they usually find a leader who is called a war boss, and then they embark on what is called a warg. Now a warg is basically a giant invasion. They don't care what they invade, but it's important that it's a good fight. And if it's not a good fight, they'll move on to the next place until they find a good fight. And they'll keep fighting until, well, basically they're all dead. Or they've conquered the galaxy, whichever comes first. And then they would probably keep fighting. But, yeah. So that's orcs. Next up are the Tyranids. Now the Tyranids are basically hordes of H.R. Geiger inspired creatures that have actually, they're a recent menace. They have just begun, relatively speaking, rampaging across the galaxy. I say rampaging across the galaxy because they are actually from outside this galaxy. As far as we know, they're the only race that originates from outside this galaxy. But they are outsiders to the galaxy and have come to eat the galaxy. they have zero individuality. They are not individuals. Instead, they have a hive mind that operate through nodes, creatures like that psychically broadcast its will to these feral creatures, and then that is what leads them and is them in many ways. They don't use technology. Instead, what they do is they evolve to any given situation. They can survive on any world because they'll adapt to it. They have guns, but bio guns and all that stuff, and they are terrifying in that when they conquer a planet, they eat it. They leave nothing but every old biomass on that planet will be eaten. Everything they can use, they take and leave nothing behind. So that's turns, nasty ones. Next up are the Tau. Now the Tau are a young species with a relatively little empire, but with great technology. They are constantly evolving that technology. They new species, up and coming, they're rapidly evolving their technology. They are humanoid, blue-skinned, kind of fish-like in appearance, and they follow a rigid caste system. However, they do let other races be part of their empire and even serve in their armies, which is kind of unusual for most of the races in, at least most of these big races in the 41st Millennia. The leading caste is the Ethereals, who basically operate, see themselves as servants of a concept called the greater good. They want to bring peace to everyone and stuff like that by violence if necessary, and that is for the greater good, the good of the common in some ways. The warrior caste is called the fire caste. Now these are not warriors like the Adeptus Astartes or a Tyranid warrior or something like that. They're actually quite puny compared to that, at least physically. However, they have highly advanced and sophisticated technology, and they especially seen in what they call battle suits, which are essentially mechs that they operate, and they have big guns, really big guns, and so they are a threat on the battlefield. They definitely are, even if they don't seem it in some ways. Lastly, we have the Necrons. Now the Necrons are an ancient species, and I know I'm saying that we operate in large terms here and stuff like that, but they are the most ancient of the species that I have gone through. Eldars are a close contender, but the Necrons are even older. They, however, are not flesh anymore. They have given up their flesh and have become basically Terminator-like robots, and they have very varying degrees of individuality. Like the lower castes, the warriors, the ground soldiers have very little individuality. However, the higher-ups do have. And they have access to ancient and highly destructive weapons. And even their technology is so advanced that even their metal bodies can regenerate, and regenerates very well indeed. Their society structure is very much akin to ancient Egypt, but with competing dynasties. There are a lot of different dynasties, and they fight each other, though they all technically are beholden to a long missing leader who is called the Silent King. But no one has heard from him for eons, at least until very recently, and I'll go into that with Necrons, but he isn't leading them as such. They're kind of fighting internally and stuff like that. Now, those are the factions I'm going to go into, and generally this was a short introduction to the 41st Millennia. Now, all of these factions vie for supremacy of the galaxy, and right now the Imperium of Man is the largest force in the galaxy. However, this may change soon, especially due to recent events, which I will go into in another video. But suffice to say that to live in the 41st Millennium is to live in interesting times. Yeah, and now I should probably go make coffee for the others because I think they're waking up. So see ya.